Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back into the video day. And today, the Houston Texans have made another huge trade. No, nobody major is going away. This time, someone really, really good is coming in. The Houston Texans have traded probably one of the worst draft picks that Nick Caserio has made in his Houston Texans tenure as the GM, in Kenyon Green, a guard who, if he hasn't been injured, he's been terrible. His rookie season in 2022 played 15 games and 14 starts and was absolutely terrible. Looked like a bust for this Houston Texans team. Then there was hope that he could bounce back in his second season, but didn't play at all because he had to have season-ending shoulder injury. Or season-ending shoulder, well, it was a season-ending shoulder injury, but a season-ending, shoulder surgery. And then he played a little bit more this season, 12 games and 9 starts, and again was still not good. And not only that, but still had injuries. So he has been, I would say, the worst draft pick in Nick Caserio's Texans history. Since Nick Caserio has been the GM. He's had quite a few drafts. I mean, he's had at least 4 or 5 drafts. I think 4 drafts that Nick Caserio. I think this is Nick Caserio's. I want to say this is Nick Caserio's 5th draft coming. He did. I think his first draft was 2021, then 22, 23, 24. So I believe this is Nick Caserio's 5th draft coming up in April. And I would say that's probably one of the worst picks that he's had. And he turned one of the worst picks he's ever selected into one of the best trades I think he's ever done as the Houston Texans GM. I would say this is the best, since the Houston Texans are getting C.J. Gardner-Johnson for Kenyon Green. I think this is the best trade Nick Caserio's ever done. If you look at what the season that C.J. Gardner-Johnson just had in Philadelphia, 16 games, 16 starts, 6 interceptions, 116 yards returned on those interceptions. One was a touchdown, 1 forced fumble, 59 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. He had an amazing season last year in Philadelphia, and the Texans gave up their bust offensive guard and a pick swap in order to get him. Look, I would say the most excited trade that Nick Caserio has ever done, that I was most excited for, was when he traded for when he did the Will Anderson trade. But to me, this is a better trade than the Will Anderson trade. Obviously, if you ask me to pick who's better, Will Anderson or C.J. Gardner-Johnson, of course it's going to be Will Anderson. And if you ask me, who you'd rather have on the team, it's Will Anderson. If you ask me, what trade I'm most excited for, it's Will Anderson still. But the Houston Texans actually had to give up a lot of assets to get that deal done and acquire Will Anderson when they traded up for the 3rd overall pick. And so that's why I say this is a better trade than that, because the Texans acquired a amazing player that just had an amazing season in C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and all they gave up was one of the worst draft picks they've ever selected and a pick swap. If you would have told me yesterday, after the Lermy Tunsil trade, if you would have told me yesterday the Texans trade for C.J. Gardner-Johnson, I would have said to you, okay, well, that probably means the Texans are trading one of the picks that they got in the Lermy Tunsil trade. No, they didn't do that. They traded Kenyon Green, the worst draft pick of Nick Caserio's, in Nick Caserio's Texans tenure, and a pick swap. And the pick swap is not even that bad. It's a 2026 5th-round pick going to the Eagles, and the Texans are getting a 2026 6th-round pick. So the Texans get a 6th and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and they get Kenyon Green and a 5th-round pick. And so that, then the Texans added the safety position. You pair C.J. Gardner-Johnson up next to Jalen Petrie and Kalen Bullock at the safety positions, and that's going to be fun to watch. And I would also say this probably means Jimmy Ward's going to get released. I would count on Jimmy Ward getting released after this trade for the Texans. But I love this deal. The reason I say it's better is because the Texans, the reason I say it's better than the Will Anderson trade is because of how the Texans didn't have to give up this much to get this player. Honestly, Will Anderson, that trade is probably one of the best trades in their franchise history, because I think Will Anderson is gonna become the second best defensive end in Houston Texans franchise history outside of J.J. Watt. So that will go down as a huge trade for the Houston Texans team and one of the best. But I think this is a very underrated trade for Nick Casario and this Texans team because they barely gave up nothing to get a guy who had a season like C.J. Gardner-Johnson did last season. So I love it. And another thing is he has Super Bowl championship experience, winning a Super Bowl, and just this season with the Eagles. Here's the thing that I wonder: when you got a guy like C.J. Gardner-Johnson who just got traded to the Texans. And you got guys like Darius Slay and James Bradbury, who released. Slay has already signed with the Steelers. When you got guys like that, it was just announced that the Eagles are going to visit the White House at the end of April. Do those guys attend with them? And if they do, is that weird? I mean, like yes, they were a part of that team, but they're not. I don't know. I know they won't be there when the Eagles open up the season. First game of the season, but. That is a nice question to know whether you'll see guys like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Darius Slay, and James Bradbury who've all been let go by the Eagles team, or other players that are no longer on the team, or you got a guy like Josh Sweat who signed with the Cardinals. Are those guys going to be a part with the team when they go to the White House? That's something I'm interested in. But moving on, great trade for the Texans. I love it. Let me know your thoughts on the trade in the comment section, and peace out.